for people who were here yesterday, we were emceeing for like an hour during lunch, and I was just eating carrots the entire time.
It was like watching a live podcast.
I have ranch Vienna, don't worry. This is not another beef like you hating apple juice.
Oh, okay. To take the blanket. Can you do the cover thingies underneath it?
Eso lo podemos hacer acá.
I just think why not do it in there at the same load?
Oh, no, because I'm gonna do the other one. The other headers. So.
I think, are we gonna maybe wait a couple more minutes just to make sure everyone can move to the right places before I get started? Also, can people see me okay? Like, is the light all right, or is it too dark? Sometimes it gets dark. Thumbs up if we're feeling okay. Okay, are we feeling good for me to start, or should I wait some more time? Yes, Rhea and I was drinking orange juice. It was orange and mango from our previous conversation. Context, me and my friend, we've been having an ongoing debate about what juice is the best juice. Let's see, I can turn away from the window a bit. Let's try this way. Awesome. Okay, cool. So welcome everybody. I hope you guys have been having a great start to your Sundays. My name is Mary Jessie Celestin. I'm the founder of San Jose Strong, and I'm here to talk to you guys about Black feminist and womanist thought. First off, I want to thank all the other co-founders of the Political Education Collective for all of the amazing hard work that you guys have been doing, that we've been doing for this past few months to get this convening together. For anybody, if this is your first workshop, the previous workshops have been amazing, and I really encourage you to at least like tap in to the work that the other people are doing, and follow their social media accounts, see what they're up to. There's really, really awesome talent here in San Jose. But without further ado, I'm gonna talk a little bit about ground rules. We're gonna have an introductory breakout session. You guys will get to know some of the other people in the space. And then I'll talk at you for an extended period of time, and we'll have another breakout session. So I think it should be a fun time. With that, let's move to the next slide. So we're going to start off with some ground rules. I took these ground rules from the 8 core values of San Jose Strong and just adjusted them slightly to not talk about running an organization and more about having this workshop space. And so the first being accountability. We take responsibility for our actions and the consequential impact and consequences, even when those are negative. So in this space, if you're talking in a small group and you say something that offends somebody else, the best mode of action is to say, my apologies for hurting you, and let's move forward and keep the conversation rolling in a way that's productive, which leads us to continuous learning, which is we believe that the process of improvement is never ending. So our work has been going on for centuries before us and will continue for centuries more. Throughout this workshop, you'll hear me talking about really, really awesome Black women over the past 2 centuries. And so this is just going to be a great space for you to pick up on all of the existing work and anything that I share. I have a long list of sources in this document that you guys will be using. So you can everyone mute their mics really quickly? There's some static. Thank you. So yeah, you want to keep that in mind when you're in your breakout rooms and your breakout space. And then we have diversity. In order to get the most comprehensive solutions to a problem, we must have diversity of thought. And so while all are welcome in our space and in this space here, I really want everybody to feel included. We are prioritizing marginalized voices. And so this is sort of the statement that I have on San Jose Strong, but in this case, we're really focused on the experiences of Black women. And so those experiences are centered in this conversation. And then we have empathy. We believe that any solution or conversation needs to be centered on those directly impacted by said solution and conversation. So keep that in mind in your breakout rooms, that when you're talking about a situation, try not to be removed from it and to consider how everyone else in the space might feel. Next slide. And then we have empowerment. We believe that everyone has something to bring to the table. Like, all of you guys are amazing, incredible people with awesome skills. And we hope to showcase some of that when you have the chance to explore who you are and what you're interested in those introductory breakout rooms. And so that's just a note within how we structure San Jose Strong as well, which is very focused on empowering committees, teams, and team members to find what it is that they love and find their superpowers and be able to use them to their strengths to benefit the organization and for us to benefit them as we work on the symbiotic dynamic, which leads us to psychological safety. So we welcome constructive feedback, and I hope for all of you to welcome constructive feedback and feel comfortable to voice your opinions, to ask questions. We promote emotional check-ins and times for break and self-care. I might include a 5-minute break in this workshop to that end. And then our last two are imagination, which is we work to imagine a community-based future for San Jose through innovation and creativity. And so just keep imagination in your heart and in your soul as we move through this workshop. And then transparency, which is we are committed to being transparent with our team and the community at all times. So we uphold honesty and directness and explain every action taken thoroughly and welcome discourse. And so you'll hopefully be engaging in a decent amount of discourse in your breakout room. So I hope that these 8 core values can extend themselves to this space, even though it is virtually and I am staring at everyone through a screen. And so with that, I'll take it to the next slide. And so give me 1 second to drop a Google link into this chat for everybody to view. 1 second. And copy the link. Sometimes things are slow when you are on Zoom, as I bet all of you guys have experienced. So I've dropped this link here. Everybody should be able to access it. If you're on your phone, you may need to go onto the dock and be kind of closing your video screen. So if it is possible to be on a computer, that's ideal, but there are options for that are catered to phones on the document. And so we're going to have our first introductory breakout room. And so I like to have things started by just seeing what you guys know and seeing what you guys think before I start to spew information at you. And so this introductory breakout includes some icebreakers to get you started. You're going to be staying with your small group for the follow-up discussion, which will be longer towards the end. And then you're going to be watching a brief video on what is womanism. And so if you are on your phones and you're not able to exit out to watch the video, I linked a website that summarizes pretty much the same thing as the video, so you can read that text instead while your peers in the breakout room watch the video. But after the video, you want to ask the questions, and all the questions are linked on the document, so be sure to have that document up. And thank you for dropping it in the chat. It's, do you identify as a feminist? Why or why not? Have you heard of womanism? If yes, what do you know about it? And then you watch this video on womanism, and in your group say, okay, so what is womanism now that you've read this little introductory? And then what were some of the distinctions you saw between feminism and womanism and the intersections you saw in that? And so I think that's a good launching point to get us started before we lead into the more lecture style portion of this workshop. And so with that, everybody, we can start to set up the breakout rooms for everyone to get to hang out. I think we'll hang out probably for roughly 10 minutes is the goal for the breakout rooms, 10 to 15 minutes for you guys to get to know each other.
And then you all are the last group. Your meeting room is here.
Rational and
So,
logical to be a feminist.
is there
and it seems illogical not
can
to.
everybody hear?
Yes.
And who's the default, who's the host for this meeting? Is that you, Mary?
Hello. Were you guys in?
Mary,
Yeah.
they are a fourth breakout group that's staying here. But can you remind me first how long you want this breakout to be?
Like 13 minutes.
Okay,
That was
got
really
it. Cool.
specific. I was like 10 to 15. That's like 13.
Sounds good.
So should we just get started in terms of the questions here? Who are you? I'll start. So my name's Toussaint Celestin. I go by he, him, his, and hometown is San Jose, and I work in high tech, work in cloud communications, very similar environment as Zoom, the video conferencing meeting solution we're using right now. Hobbies include, quite a few, but reading history and mythology and music production, very interested in that. And I know we have a music group within San Jose Strong. And so looking into being a part of that effort. But yeah, that's who I am. Should I just stop there and let others introduce themselves? Maybe starting with Stephanie.
Hi, my name's Stephanie. I go by she or her. I currently work in the retail field, but I'm finishing my graduate program for counseling education, so hoping to be a higher education counselor. I was brought aware about this meeting by a friend of mine that actually works with the organization, so I'm just excited to see what I can learn. So I'm excited to be here.
Awesome. Let's move on to Theo.
Sure. My name is Teo. I use she, her pronouns. My hometown is Portland, Maine. I'm currently a student at Smith College, but I do research on sustainable investment. And my hobbies also include music, reading, and recently I've been really into playing Minecraft. Yeah.
Nice. Hopefully the air quality is okay up there in Portland. We're getting fits and spurts here in San Jose, but not to digress. I think I've got Dennis. I don't know if you're busy with the cupboard or if you wanted to introduce yourself.
I'm good. How's it going, everybody? My name is Dennis. I go by he, him pronouns. I live here in San Jose and just excited to learn more about Black Feminist thought.
Awesome. Amelia?
Hi, I'm Amelia. I'm actually your tech person for this session, but I use she, her pronouns, and I'm in San Jose.
Got it. And someone by the name of Political Education?
Also working on just making sure the breakout rooms don't break.
Awesome.
I'm Lauren. I use she or they. Nice to meet you.
Thank
I will
you.
partly participate.
No worries. Thank you for making all of this happen. And then we've got the last two, Isaiah.
Isaiah may have stepped away. I'm not sure. And Lutana too. They're both supposed to be in the other group, but they didn't join yet, so they may have stepped away from their computers. I'm not sure.
Hello.
Oh no, hey.
Hi. Yeah, I'm here to learn about Black feminist thought from Mary. Name is Lotana. Pronouns are he, him, his, and I am a student at Harvard College studying math. Oh, and I live in New York.
Glad you are here. And then let's see here. So the next thing, and we'll just go around the horn again. You don't have to answer all of them, but if anybody wants to start out, if you could have any superpower, what would it be and why? Or, because we only have 10 minutes, so I don't know if we'll get through all of these, if you could travel anywhere in the world, where would you go and why? And I'll start at the top of the order again with Stephanie. A superpower or a place you'd like to travel to and why?
Superpower. Let's start with the other one because I'd have to think about that. Well, if I had to choose, I don't know if you guys seen the Avengers, but there is one character in there. She's like the one that has the little antennas, and she kind of controls people's, I guess, feelings. I'm not sure exactly, but I like the idea that, you know, if someone is having a panic attack, you could kind of just like bring it down. So especially helpful for myself. In terms of where I would go, oh my goodness. I really want to go to New Zealand, and I really want to stay in the movie set where The Shire was filmed. It's probably where I would go because I love those movies.
Awesome. Great way to kick it off. Teo, I think I got it right this time. You want to talk about a superpower, and it can be a real or fictional superpower.
Sure. You got my name right. Thank you so much. I think if I could have a superpower, I would probably want to be able to become invisible. I don't know why. It just seems really fun. I like just kind of the idea of wandering around, being just kind of like a fly on the wall, I suppose. Just seeing what's going on, having to interact. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. And let's see, Dennis, you've got a place you want to go to, or a skill set that you want to applaud?
Yeah, for sure. I'm actually, this weekend, I'm also doing, it's kind of a retreat on sacred masculinity. And one of the things that they talked about is as men, as people, sometimes we have a hard time finding a home for our emotions. So I think within the body, so it feels like a lot of what we do is up here. So if I had a superpower, I think I would love to be able to just bring whatever's up here down into the body and really hone and find a home for these emotions that want to arise and be able to name it.
Awesome. That's a very colorful and impactful superpower wish. Lotena, you want to go next?
Yeah, sure. Well, I know that I would probably want to go back to Barcelona because I got kicked out a little early due to COVID. So I definitely want to go back there if I could. But as for superpower, I definitely would want to be able to teleport because I really don't like traveling, like the act of it.
Cool. And I guess for myself, New Zealand's on the list too as well, because I just hear so many beautiful things about it. It's just supposed to be a very magical, just a lot of grand nature there. And for a superpower, I'm always uncomfortable in social situations. So in line with some of the principles that Mary was talking about earlier, it'd be great. I'd love to have the superpower of having the chill factor, allowing everybody, you know, being in a group of people and then helping everyone just kind of get into a state where it's very comfortable to just be around each other and nobody's kind of on edge or anxious or anything like that. So I guess it's kind of like a grouping, easy grouping superpower. I think we've only got a couple. Did I miss anyone? Was there anyone else who needed to? I think I got everybody. The rest are our technical support staff who are doing a wonderful job. Let's see here, fun questions. So I think we've done that. If we could do anything we wanted to do in the day and money was not an issue. And you know, for the sake of time, I'm gonna jump to the third question because we're probably gonna get out of breakout session in a couple minutes. So this time we'll start with Teo and ask, how have you been navigating the world right now? What have been any uplifting experiences or challenging experiences?
I'm sorry, I couldn't tell if I was muted or not. I think that I've been navigating the world much like everybody else, just as best as I can, but definitely with the support of my friends specifically, and also with I think the support of just hopeful literature, which I don't expect to see during the day, but any kind of news articles that talk about either technological advancements or that talk about you know, activism coming from people that are my brother's age, who just turned 17, and he's really involved in activism in my hometown. And I really appreciate that. And that's kind of how I've been able to navigate the world. And those are kind of the uplifting things. I feel like I don't really want to talk about what the challenging experiences are because they're just so universal. I don't know. You know, it's a kind of a bad time in the world right now. The government is horrible. And so is everything else a little bit. So yeah, that's where I'm at.
I feel, thanks for that. Yeah, definitely a lot of challenges. I think we're all feeling the pressure of 6+ months dealing with shelter in place. Stephanie, do you want to talk a little bit about how you're navigating things today?
One day at a time. My brain works better when I don't think about large pictures and I break it up into achievable goals. So for me, I was laid off due to the pandemic, but I think you just try and take the time and channel it into the things that you don't have time to invest in. You know, like I've taken up painting, which has been really fun, and I didn't think I would like it as much. I have definitely invested getting a little bit more politically active, trying to, you know, understand the system as a whole, where I would say maybe in the past, I definitely wasn't as attentive, and just kind of evaluating myself, you know, what do I need to work on, both professionally and personally. But having fun, I think, is the one thing that is helping me get through, you know, making sure I'm investing in my friendships, I'm talking to the people I love, despite the fact that I can't be there with them, even just calling grandma, you know, on Friday to say, what's up, how's it going? What Lifetime movie is she watching? You know, keeping that social connection, I think, has been key to my success during this time.
Awesome, makes a lot of sense. Yeah, trying to stay connected even in these challenging times makes a difference for sure. Lieutenant, what are you doing to keep your sanity and navigate life as it is today?
Well, before school started, I wasn't really doing too much. Every so often I'd maybe watch something, or I would be on a call with friends. I think calling my friends is definitely super helpful in terms of like keeping me going. And if I had the energy, I would like try and like move around a little bit, maybe dance a little bit. But I think mostly it's been like hobbies like dance or cooking.
Yeah, I was going to ask if were there any inspiring dance moves that came out of COVID, but it sounds like at least you're still staying within the art.
I'm definitely better at it, which is good.
Awesome. Thanks for that. And let's see. I will go with the next one, and then I'll pass it on to Dennis so that he can finish seasoning his food. I think for me, adaptation is the biggest one. Just making sure that I try new things, because when I thought it was going to expire in just a couple of months, I was just waiting to get back to routine. And then when routine didn't take place, for example, just exercising, we used to have a gym right near, right across the way that I could go to. And when that wasn't available anymore because of, they closed it down, I had to find alternatives, whether it's walking in the park, of course, keeping safe distancing, or finding a track, or doing something else, like meditating. My job offered some virtual classes on some meditation practices that are just like 10 minutes long. I've never done them before, but I figured, okay, be open, try something new, adapt. And although I don't do it every day, I found that when I do it, it's useful. So I guess just being open and willing to adapt and trying new things has helped me out. Hopefully we don't get cut off. I know we have just a minute or so left. Dennis, anything you want to add in terms of how you're navigating the world we live in today?
Yeah, most definitely. So I was laid off about a few months ago, right after George Floyd's death. Actually asked my workplace to address it, and then within a day and a half they let me go. And so I've kind of been going through this period of reckoning as a non-Black person of color, Asian American, in our complicity, oftentimes to whiteness. And so luckily I told my partner, I was like, I kind of want to commit this year to like understanding more and actually like helping with in my own little way to understand things. And so I think what's helped out a lot is I entered into an anti-racist Dharma course. That's a Buddhist course for basically meditation, understanding kind of the basic sort of precepts, and doing that in a anti-racist way. And that's helped me out a lot in terms of just kind of like grounding kind of things in the body. And I feel like I've kind of been on this theme the last few months of, getting out of here and making sure that whatever I'm learning is felt.
Awesome. That's great. And I guess perfect timing, because we're back into our groups.
Hello, do we have everybody back yet?
Just about. Looks like the third breakout room hasn't come back yet.
Okay, we will chill here.
Some folks in our breakout, we thought you all were going to bring us back, not that we have to leave the breakout to come back.
Yeah,
so they might be stuck over there, is what I'm saying.
Okay.
So maybe ping them or something so they know how to get out.
I think Gray is actually going through each of the rooms, calling people back.
Yeah, I think she does it automatically, because we were brought back. I didn't do anything.
We brought ourselves back.
Yeah, I think you were in the main room, so then you were just automatically gonna be there.
Dante was just wrapping up a thought, but you can start if you want.
Yeah, I want to leave a couple minutes if anyone wanted to share with the larger group any of their reflections or things that they learned from their small group discussion. Feel free to shout it out or type into the chat room any cool things you learned or fun things your peers shared.
Well, I'll start by saying that I think everybody's finding innovative ways to adapt and deal with a lot of the negativism that's going on just in the news and everything else. But I thought Dennis brought up some great points about trying to internalize or you know, get out of the head and into the heart and soul of things that he's experiencing. What's interesting is that 2 of the people in our group were impacted, their jobs were impacted, which just goes to show that there's a lot of change that people are having to deal with. So, you know, just being open-minded and willing to experiment seem to be some of the themes that came up in our discussion.
Thank you for sharing. Are there any other comments that folks wanted to share before we move on to the next portion?
Yeah, I just wanted to say before the today in this breakout session, I had no idea what womanism was. I never heard about it before, but I just appreciated learning something new and discussing it amongst the women in my breakout room as well.
Yay, thank you for sharing. And if folks feel like just dropping any of their comments in the chat room, you're welcome to do so. I love it in my classes when people clap react other things that people say that they relate to or they think are cool. So whenever your peers do that, I always think it's fun to use the Zoom emojis that we have. But with that, we'll go to our next slide where I'll basically summarize what the article and the video were saying. And so these are the textbook definitions that I found describing feminism, Black feminism, and Black womanism, with the famous quote from Alice Walker, who I'll be talking a bit about later on, which says, "A womanist is to feminist as purple is to lavender." So feminism is often defined as a range of movements that aim to define and establish the political, economic, personal, and social equality of the sexes. Whereas Black feminism holds that the experience of Black women gives rise to a particular understanding of their position in relation to sexism, class oppression, and racism. And then the distinction made between Black feminism and womanism can be very niche, but it's that womanism is a social theory based on the history and everyday experiences of women of color, especially Black women, by seeking to restore the balance between people and the environment with a very heavy emphasis on the spiritual aspect to it, particularly because it was coined by Alice Walker, who has a long-standing history of connection to spirituality and being deeply rooted in that ethos. And so, as noted in the video, whereas Black feminism works very much so within the current structure of more mainstream feminist movements, womanism has its own separate section within the large umbrella of feminism that's carved out very specifically for Black women and structured around it. So it's the social theory is built within that context rather added within it. That said, they're still very similar together. And so one thing I noticed from my small group was the peers were talking, the peers, I don't know, that sounds weird. The other people in my small group were talking about how feminism can be very much so defined by the individual, and that people will have different reactions when they hear the word feminist, or think of, that one person who was very loud about being a feminist in a certain way, and then that's what they associate the term with, and that there's a lot of complexity within the identity of a feminist. And I think we can see that very much so very recently with the Women's March. The Women's March being this really, really cool way for women to make a stand and to make this march. But one thing that people noted across the country in different sections of the Women's March, which we also saw in the Women's March of San Jose, was that there was oftentimes a lack of intersectionality, where it forces anyone who isn't already kind of a part of this mainstream, white straight women section of feminism kind of cast aside. And so I found it very interesting when I was being introduced, particularly to womanism, to explore this aspect of intersectionality as we move forward, particularly in this political climate where Black women are often at the front lines of this movement and simultaneously the least protected in this movement, which we've seen with the recent court cases surrounding Breonna Taylor's murder, right? So I found that this was a really important conversation to be having, particularly for Black women in this moment in time. And so with that, we can move on to our next slide. And so for the next, however, probably like 20 minutes, I'm gonna estimate I'm gonna be talking. I wanted to center this next period of time to look at the past 2 centuries from the perspective of some really awesome, influential Black women, and to sort of look at, okay, so what would happen if we start to just experience history through the perspective and the lens of Black women? You know, the history of Black feminism and womanism comes from Black women revolutionaries and academics and everybody in between who comes together to make these definitions and create these spaces. And I loved how someone in my small group noted there was a womanist magazine in their college for and by women of color, which reminds me a bit of Martha Street's zine for liberation. That's really awesome and often centers women of color in San Jose. So that's a quick shout out to Martha Street and Jessica right there. But yeah, so I'm just gonna be talking about some really, really cool Black women who've done awesome stuff. And yes, shout out to Mills College. And then you guys will go back into your small groups where you'll have some more introspective questions and reflections to explore. I've also linked all the sources. There's like a lot of sources that I was just reading and referencing, and you'll also get to learn a little bit about my experiences. And I'll be sharing one scene from a short story that I wrote in reference to a Black feminist and womanist thought class that I took that inspired a lot of this workshop. I will also be talking about the professor who taught that class as well. But without further ado, we're going to be starting with Sanité Belair, who is a Haitian revolutionary. For those who don't know, I am Haitian American, so you know I had to start this off with this awesome Haitian revolutionary. And for those who also don't know, the Haitian Revolution is the only successful slave revolution in the world and shot ripples of impact over the globe when the Haitian community revolted against the French and made themselves an independent nation in a time when slavery was still widespread, still very prevalent and present in the United States, and was really a game changer in terms of everything from the culture and the way that you look at slavery and turning those tides 2 centuries ago, to even influencing how we established the American colonies back in the day were able to establish how they purchased land with the French when Napoleon lost Haiti and no longer had interest in the Americas. And so this story, I think, is a great showcase of the tenacity of Black women and just a really inspiring story. So Sanité is a revolutionary. She was a lieutenant in the army of Toussaint Louverture. So a really cool aspect of the Haitian Revolution was that women, Black women, were centered often in this revolution. And so she's considered a hero and actually has, there's like a money bill that has her face on it. And so she was actually captured in 1802, and her husband chose to turn himself in with her to die alongside her. And so she was being executed in standard that you would be having a blindfold on, and she like refused to wear this blindfold and was like, I'm gonna stare you in the eyes and like cries out like long live freedom, down with slavery in her last words, and is known for being very calm and very direct in these last moments. That's one of the things she went down for. And so I think that's a really good way to start off this history of the past 2 centuries. Next slide. And next I wanted to talk about was Marie Laveau. And so Marie Laveau is known as a really powerful voodoo queen who was revered in New Orleans. Could we turn off mics really quickly? Thank you. And so she was a devout Catholic. It's known that she went to church every day. That's one of the legends. She was mixed raced. So she had 3 identities. And that comes from being born to a slave family, but then becoming a freed person herself. And her first husband, Jacques Paris, was part of a large Haitian immigration to New Orleans post the Haitian Revolution that we were just talking about. And so introduction to Haitian culture and the voodoo religion really inspired Marie Laveau to get involved in voodoo, which has a lot of direct connections to Catholicism. And so for those who don't know what voodoo is beyond just, you know, things you hear in the media, or if you watched Princess and the Frog once, voodoo is a real religion. It's not just the occult. Actually, only 4 to 5% of voodoo practitioners participate in the sect that's called Black magic, that you see popularized throughout the mainstream media, whether that's our music or our movies, or, you know, it's October, I love Halloween, but, you know, just sort of that sentiment is often misconstrued into the actual practice of voodoo, which is very focused on healing, on community, on connection between the spiritual realm and the real, and the like reality, and the intersections. It is monotheistic. It is in many ways the hybridization of Catholicism and African tribal religions, given that the Haitian community is the intersection of French colonizers, indigenous members of that island, and the African slaves brought onto the island. And so she is actually really incredible and interesting story. I haven't seen the show, but I've heard that she's in American Horror Story. She's in one of the seasons. I haven't seen it, but I heard that they reference her there. She's both notorious and beloved. Thousands visit her grave every year to this day. And the really interesting aspect, if you look at when she lived, she was born in 1794 and died in 1881. And she was so famous and so powerful that when she died, the New York Times did a whole article exhibition on her work, basically claiming she was much like a saint. She both like overthrew and, oh yeah, Coven season 3. She both overthrew and connected with other voodoo queens in the area. And what she was able to accomplish as a Black woman in New Orleans was really incredible. Whether people were enslaved free people at the time, or even members of the white community, like everybody was down for Marie Laveau and what she represented and how she brought people together. And so she's a really, really interesting story about just the power of Black women to claim a space and to really make their own way. And I think that she's a story that people should know more about, since given the time where slavery is still so prevalent in the United States, she was crossed all racial lines. She just had all of this influence. And there was like stories of, white men fearing just, don't cross Marie Laveau because she's one of the most powerful people. She'll do this or do that if you go the wrong way. Like, you have to make sure that you are on the right side of Marie Laveau's fan base. And so she's a really, really cool person to hear about, which leads me to the next person. Next slide. being Zora Neale Hurston. So I'm choosing things within each time frame. And so definitely understand that this is a very small snippet into the awesome history of Black women all across the diaspora. There's an emphasis here on the Haitian community and also the United States. But just so you guys know, like this is by no means a comprehensive list, and in many ways just scratching the surface. But my connection from Marie Laveau to Zora Neale Hurston is that Zora Neale Hurston spent a lot of her anthropological work connecting with the Haitian American community, and also traveled to Haiti and did anthropological work there. And being born right after the time frame of Marie Laveau, many of the people she would have interviewed and had connections with had been connected with Marie Laveau during her reign, because right after Marie Laveau had passed away, her daughter, Marie II, took on her role for another few decades, and many kind of connected them together and saw them as pretty much the same person. So you can definitely bet that Zora Neale Hurston had intersections with Marie Laveau's influence in her work. And so for those who don't know who Zora Neale Hurston is, she is most known as a novelist, but she's also an anthropological folklore writer, and in many ways a historian. And so a little bit about Zora Neale Hurston is that she was raised in the nation's first incorporated Black township. And that's something that's really important to note, because being raised in an incorporated Black township, Zora Neale Hurston wasn't exposed or indoctrinated into the senses of inferiority that was often widespread within the United States. And so where she grew up, you know, the mayor was Black, you know, the doctors were Black, the teachers, so she just saw Black excellence everywhere she went. And so for her, she just saw Black as being beautiful. And when her mother passed away at the age of 13 and her father remarried and wasn't really focused on her, and the stepmom wasn't really the coolest person on the planet, Zora Neale Hurston became financially independent and went on to just do odd jobs for the next decade. And at 26, she said, you know, I really want to finish school. Very classically Zora Neale Hurston, who's known for her just her spunk and her just go get it attitude. She said, you know, I want to go back to school, but she's 26 and she hadn't finished high school. And so she decided to knock off 10 years off her life and say that she was 16. And she went on to be 10 years younger up until she died. Like, people had to debate for a while, like when she was born. So people thought she was born in 1901 for like 50 years or so, until she had passed away, and they'd gone into like her actual birth certificate and things. But she went on to publish over a dozen novels, anthropological folklore, and short stories and essays. She is most known for her work, Their Eyes Were Watching God, which many of you could have read in high school. I was first introduced to Zora Neale Hurston when I read Their Eyes Were Watching God in high school. And then also, for the context to my interest in Zora Neale Hurston, I took a literature course on her work in college. So I spent a semester just looking at what she's been up to. And she's actually a really controversial figure in a lot of ways, and was known as the Black Sheep of the Harlem Renaissance. And one of the main things is that she was not a fan of Brown versus Board of Education. Like, she was really not here for integration, which many people were shocked by. If you look into Their Eyes Were Watching God and you look into just her work and her story, people will be perplexed. But she actually has a very moving essay, which is actually references sheep, which discusses why she was not a fan of Brown versus Board. And the reasoning was that she was not interested in forcibly integrating the Black community into predominantly white spaces where they were unwelcome and would be often subject to harm and violence, which we see all of the time. And she was more interested in equal access to resources. And so her big thing was, yeah, I don't really need I don't need to live in a white neighborhood to be successful or to feel empowered. I was empowered in my incorporated Black township. I just want us to have more money and resources and have the same access to those resources as you guys. And so that was the big thing that she was pushing for. But many people would criticize Hurston as being someone who pandered to whiteness and to people who would, and to members of the white elite who would fund her writing. I would make and I have made the argument that she instead is actually just focusing on the beauty in the diverse ways in which people showcase Blackness, and not trying to only focus on Black elite exceptionalism in an academic space. And so she's someone who actively includes African American vernacular in her writing, and she includes it in the way that she uses dialogue throughout all of her writing. And that is something that she was criticized for by the Black community, by saying that she was doing caricatures of the Black community. But she continually will make the argument, and I would make the argument as well, that she's showing that no, like African American vernacular is a real language. Like we can showcase the culture outside of whiteness and not have to show that, oh, look, see, we're as good, we're all at all of these things, and instead just show the stories as they are and as they unfold in the complexities that they have. And so she, despite commercial success for her works early on in her career, she actually died and was buried in an unmarked grave and died in poverty until Alice Walker found her a decade later and placed a marker naming her Zora Neale Hurston, a genius of the South, and really brought her work to the forefront. So whereas she in 1960 was about to be swept away in history, now she's known throughout the world for her work, which leads us to our next slide on Alice Walker herself, who grew up in rural Georgia. Her parents were sharecroppers. And after she was blinded in her early tween years by her brother's BB gun, she picked up reading, which is a really interesting story. She was blinded in one eye. And so in that sense, she started to be like, okay, I'm gonna use the heck out of my working eye and start engaging in reading. And so she has an extensive writing career. She received the Pulitzer Prize for fiction for her work, The Color Purple. She's a civil rights activist, and she worked throughout the civil rights movement in the 1960s, directly with Martin Luther King Jr., who, after meeting, inspired her to get to work and also work on a lot of voting rights campaigns. She is known for coining the term womanist, as we mentioned in the video, in her collection In Search of Our Mother's Garden. And she has a wide range of influence on everything from Black rights to gender equality to the intersections of the two. I did want to note that she has come under criticism for alleged anti-Semitic views due to her preference and engagement with an author, I think by the name of Ike, and his work. And so that's something that has been contested and debated, particularly over the past decade. But she is not, or in addition, she is has done a lot of incredible work, and that's something that I just wanted to note when we're discussing a person's holistic experience and work over their lifetime. And so she is someone who has connected with a lot of other Black female activists, authors, champions of Black feminism and womanism, which brings us to our next slide, which is about Audre Lorde, who's a poet and activist. I say poet. I want to keep it to like one line because I was like, man, if I fill in all the things that all of these women do, like it's just going to be their title is going to fill up the entire PowerPoint slide. But she's known as a prose writer and a novelist and a short story writer. But she is best known for her poetry, and that is what she is most passionate about. She grew up in New York City to West Indian immigrant parents and went to Catholic school when she grew up. She lives in the intersection. It's very interesting when I was reading up on her biographies. She was married briefly in the 70s, but she's since then, and she had 2 children, but since then came out as a lesbian, and her former partner came out as gay. So they both went their separate ways. And so she is a Black lesbian mother and also a cancer survivor. And she's a really big advocate for living in your true self. And so she has a series of essays in which she chose not to have any amendments after having to have surgery for her breast cancer, just to be like, oh, we are consistently told, Black women are consistently told, particularly in the health care field, that you have to process and manage things in silence. And she's like, I want these things that I've gone through to be visible and not to make any amendments from that. She's also known for founding The Kitchen Table, which is a women of color press that was meant to empower Black feminists. She defined herself as a Black feminist and a womanist and championed both of those things. She often collaborated with Alice Walker, who I just mentioned. So you're seeing how they build off of each other. You know, Alice Walker is inspired by Zora Neale Hurston. She starts to connect with Audre Lorde. They start empowering the next generation. You have this ripple effect. She was a professor, a poet laureate of New York, and so much more, and passed away in 1992, which leads me to my next slide. And so I wanted to do I just wanted to talk about Octavia Butler. I was first introduced to her by a friend of mine in college who had mentioned that a protagonist in one of her books, Parable of the Sower, reminded him a lot of me. And so of course I was like, ooh, you're talking about me, in an egotistical fashion, was like, well, who's this person about? And then I was like, wow, Octavia Butler is really, really cool. She grew up in Pasadena, California. Her father passed away when she was very young, and she worked as a maid to support the family, but still had a passion for her education. And many of the times when she talks about sort of her upbringing, she was known as being very, very tall and very, very shy and very, very awkward. She was dyslexic, but didn't let that deter her from being an avid reader and getting involved in reading. And she was really, really shy, but didn't let that deter her from becoming a renowned author and taking the steps necessary to get her work out there and to engage post her college graduate experience. And so she's the first science fiction author of any color and background besides white and gender to receive the MacArthur Genius Grant Fellowship for science fiction, which gives a lot of money for 5 years every year for an author to work on their science fiction work. And so her work exemplifies Afrofuturism and feminism and the intersections of those two. And so Parable of the Sower, for example, is a really, really interesting book about, I'm like reading some of the comments as they come in, and is a really, really interesting book about a young woman in this post-apocalyptic Los Angeles space, where she ends up in many ways becoming a prophet and building this new religion of Earthseed in which God is change. And that's the conceptualization we have of God. And she also has Afrofuturism work that's set within the African continent and is really, really powerful and interesting and engaging. And yeah, so the female protagonists are incredible. They have superpowers, they do awesome things. And she was publishing these books throughout the mid 1900s, where she was often the only Black woman in the space talking about these Afrofuturistic stories. And so she was a real champion of feminism in that particular realm. And as a fantasy and science fiction author myself, I found her work really, really inspiring and engaging. And so next slide. Yeah, and so then this brings us to Dr. Delara Uskup. She is, I don't know how old she is or when she was born, but she's pretty young. She's like in her 30s right now. And she's a native of Izmir, Turkey, but was raised in Detroit, Michigan by her Turkish father and African-American mother. She's received joint PhDs, which is really impressive, from U Chicago, and she's in her early 30s. So that's, again, it's really impressive. And her research interests include race, politics, religion, gender, sexuality, and health at the intersection of public opinion and policy. So she currently does a lot of healthcare research at UCLA. And she's also been an associate professor at Scripps College, which is how I met her when I took her Black feminist and womanist studies class my sophomore spring. So that's like a year and a half ago, which I was introduced to a lot of these concepts by my wonderful parents in the audience and their job centering Black women in my upbringing. But this class was really where I got to learn a lot more and be shown a lot of these texts. And so I wanted to reference Professor Uskup, particularly because in the next slide, I'm going to talk a little bit about my final project for this class. But yeah, so her work is really awesome. And this sort of encompasses this past 2 centuries through the lens of Black women, and just learning about these awesome Black feminists and womanists and how they've championed for equity throughout their lifetime, but also a way of looking at all of these different angles and appreciations of Black feminism and womanism, and how, regardless of these different backgrounds from all over the country, where these women have hailed, or from Haiti, shout out to the beginning, the influence and impact they had on the next generation, which leads me to my next slide. Let's see, one second. Can't close, cool. I need to close the link really quickly. And so this leads me to I Am the Bridge, Call Me by My Name. And so this graphic here, I actually drew this year for a song of mine called Dragon Soul, which is for my upcoming album, which I'm very excited about. And so this was a single off of that album, but this, and also says San Jose on it, which love San Jose. And the sense of this song, I wrote it when I was studying abroad in New Zealand. I think 2 of my really good friends from New Zealand are in this audience right now. So we went to New Zealand to study abroad, and then COVID happened 5 weeks into our trip and we came home. But during that time, we had some very interesting experiences, some of which were pretty sexist and or racist. And so in sort of processing that experience, and then, you know, the consequential uprisings that happened, you know, a few months after and are still going on, I had written the song Dragon Soul. And so this is me in my own little island. In the lyrics, I say, pop off, try me, I start fires. Dragon Soul, I've been hired. And so this is me and my dragon soul on our own island of flames in in space, you know, removed from everything else, creating our own sense. But this also reminded me a lot of my final project for Dr. Uskup's class on Black feminist and womanist thought, which is where I'm going to be closing out this brief seminar of history. And so this short story was me talking about how voodoo can empower Black women to can be a form of empowerment for Black women. And so this short story centers 2 young Black women, particularly the main character and protagonist, Nvensi, which is a derivation from the Creole word for invincible. And so I have one scene of this short story that I'm going to read to you. It's also linked in the Google document. I can also link the full short story too. But yeah, so I'm going to read that for you guys to have a bit of room for reflection before I let you guys go back into your small groups and answer some of the discussion questions, which I'll talk about. Okay, yes, I'll put the full short story into the document. And so without further ado, we have the opening scene for I Am the Bridge, Call Me by My Name. The breeze rustled the leaves of the trees surrounding Invency on the dark summer night. Mon fille pour Marie, she heard her grandmother's voice, carried by the wind, whispering in her ear. Invency nodded. She understood. Shifting her feet, she stared down her potential opponent. We are born to die, Invency repeated. She stood at the end of the street. She was the creature from the shadow. He stood at the end of the street. He was the creature from the shadows, the monster under the bed. He was a dark spirit, nothing more, nothing less. Invency had sensed his presence earlier that morning. She knew she had to address him. No one else knew how to handle a Loa, not in this city. He was a deep shade of blue, shimmering and shifting with the moonlight, an amorphous figure that looked vaguely humanoid, but Invency knew that was only because she perceived him this way. The masculine energy was also a perception, a tint to his blue to resonate with her sense of the world. She appreciated the effort. The Loa wanted her to see it. Invency took off, running towards him with her silver machetes in hand. She never went anywhere without them. As she threw herself into the arms, she sliced the air with her blades, collapsible beauties that could grow to twice her height when needed. Yes, they were blades, but that didn't mean they were designed to inflict pain. Not always. They changed as her needs changed. And Invency knew what they needed to do tonight. There was a balance to this battle, if you could even call it that. Invency fell into the Loa's embrace, enveloped within his energy. On this night, the blades held her feelings. They sliced into the Loa, but did no harm. Instead, they acted as a vessel, the connection that linked Invency's ethos to the Loa's. This Loa was one with darkness, and although Invency had sworn herself to the path of light, she still found a home in the embrace of this Loa. There was no qualms between darkness and light. Instead, they worked in tandem with each other. There was a trade in their dance. She soothed his woes, gave him advice to navigate the changing landscape of the visible world, and in return, he imbued her with knowledge, secrets of the universe. There was a somberness to their exchange. There was a longing in their sharing. That's all a Loa really needed, to be heard, to share his pain. Once their dance concluded, Invency walked to the sidewalk. She was soaking wet. She kicked up her skateboard and off. The tug and pull of the universe always shoved Invency on a tightrope, and she could only balance for so long. As she skated, she thought on this fact and the impact it was having on her life. She grew lonelier the more knowledge she obtained. Her grandmother's wind began to dry her off. I know, Grandmama, I need to be careful. I can only learn so much. And so that is the first scene of I Am the Bridge, Call Me by My Name. I'll drop the full scene link. And with that, we can go to our next slide, which has our last breakout, we've only had one, our second breakout session, where you guys will go back to your original teams and you'll reflect on some introductory questions I've left for you, which include what were your reactions to the first scene of the story? How did the scene tie and intersect with the stories of the Black women in this presentation? Did you know about everyone in this presentation? If not, did you learn about someone new? And what did you find interesting from the new people you learned about? And then thinking back on your educational experience, particularly in history classes, when did you see Black women showcased and how were they described? How do you see Black women described and showcased in popular culture? If you are a Black woman yourself, how do you find your intersectionality throughout your experiences? And if you don't identify as a Black woman, how do you find your intersectionality? And when do you see yourself centering Black women? How would you define yourself now in light of this workshop? A feminist, a Black feminist, a womanist, something else, all of the above. I'd identify as all of the above myself. And I'll leave these quotes from Zora Neale Hurston, Audre Lorde, and Octavia Butler. So Zora Neale Hurston says, "If you are silent about your pain, they'll kill you and say you enjoyed it." And then from Audre Lorde, we have, "When I dare to be powerful, to use my strength in the service of my vision, then it becomes less and less important whether I am afraid." And then finally with Octavia Butler, "All that you touch, you change. All that you change, changes you." Which later on in the book, she says, God is change, which is the central tenet of this religion in the book, Parable of the Sower, called Earth Seed. And with that, we can go back into our breakout rooms. I'll check out any of the questions we've had so far, and we can brainstorm and discuss with each other in our breakout sessions. And I hope you have been enjoying the presentation so far. I'll say, if everyone would be okay to continue for an additional 5 minutes, I'd like to give the groups 15 minutes to talk with one another. And then we could do closing out for the last 5 minutes from like 2:30 to 2:35. And yeah, so we can go into our breakouts.
So if you joined recently, I just assigned you to rooms, but otherwise you should be able to click on the breakout room button and just go back to the room that you were in before. If there's any problem with that, let me know. Looks like you all are back.
Yes, it does. Well, awesome. I actually learned a lot of things. And let's see if we can't pull up the questions. I don't know. Does anybody have the questions? I did not click onto them before we got put into breakout.
If you click in the chat, it should still be there, and I'll redrop the link too.
Breakout questions, here it is. It's coming up. It looks like we have somebody new. Were you with us, Nicole?
I was in a different breakout group earlier, but looks like I'm here this time.
All right.
Hi.
Hi, welcome. And I guess since you're the newest one, we'll start with you, if you don't mind. But I'm trying to pull up the questions. I'll try and see here.
I'm not sure I have too much to say, so I might be kind of short if we start with me.
That's all right. Actually, does anybody want to volunteer if you want to raise your hand and just jump right in and answer any of the questions, whether it's the reaction to the short story, or did you know everyone in the presentation? I, for one, did not know everyone in the presentation. I knew a couple of them. But anybody want to jump in?
Yeah, I'll jump in. I think I have the questions up in the chat. So the first one is, what were your reactions to the first scene of the short story? Is that the ones we're talking about? And how did the scene intersect with the stories of the Black women in the presentation?
Yep.
I found the short story very interesting, and I'd love to read the full. I think what I took away, I had to reread it. It's hard sometimes for me to listen and process. But I think what I took away was just that, like one of the lines in there, I'm sorry, I wish I could. She says that, where is it? I'm so sorry. It's something
That's all
about
right.
the
Take
fact
your
that
time.
it's something about the fact that, you know, she's describing the Loa, you know, and that, you know, it seems almost like kind of like a dark, mysterious, something to be concerned about. But she acknowledges that that is just her perception of the Loa, which is kind of creating, you know, which is why she sees it that way. And I think that kind of resonated with me, just because sometimes how we perceive people in the world is influenced a lot by things that we're told, rather than learning from individuals themselves, I guess, or just biases and things like that. So to me, it just kind of, I don't know, it hit a spot where it's like, you know, you have to think about what your environment is telling you versus what, you know, who that person truly is, I guess. But that's one thing that I felt stood out for me.
Awesome, insightful and makes sense. Definitely related to that. Does anybody else have a comment? I think of all the questions here, what's interesting, thinking back on your educational experience, particularly in history classes, when did you see Black women showcased and how were they described? I have to admit, although I am Black and I've been in a number of school systems, you know, other than like Harriet Tubman for the Underground Railroad, I really didn't have many images of Black women in doing such impactful things in society. And so it was very enlightening, just this, as Mary said it, very, you know, snippet examples of history and what people can do if they're impassioned and they really want to make a difference. And I was struck by how often they were marginal in terms of the larger society. They came from groups that weren't considered mainstream and yet had the ability to impact not just their world, but the broader white world, and definitely the ability to impact in a very male-dominated society, whether you were white or otherwise, in the late 1800s is pretty amazing. And so, you know, if I had to answer the question how Black women and women in general are described and showcased in our popular culture, I'd have to think about that, but I guess there's an invisibility there. Unfortunately, I have to think of like common images that you see like in the grocery store, like, you know, Aunt Jemima, or sometimes in the old movies where it's just subordinate, subservient positions, very acquiescent, very weak, and definitely a counter to what Mary was describing. So I don't know, I found it very enlightening. I think I learned a lot, but I'm hugging the mic. Anybody want to jump in and answer any of these questions in terms of history or your reaction to the short story? Maybe if there's a guy, Dennis or Lieutenant, if you guys have any comments.
I really like the short story a lot too. And I think what I was thinking about was just kind of the interplay sometimes with like lightness and dark. And then as Mary was reading, it kind of shot me back to her description of Nora Heel Hurston, and the fact that in some ways like she was not popular among the folks in the Harlem Renaissance because of her stance against integration, Ord versus Brown of education. I think that was what she had described. And learning more about, you know, like communities and how she I guess in some ways was more about not necessarily integration as a way to do better, but seeing it as more about resources, providing resources so that folks have what they need. And sorry, I'm kind of rambling a little bit. I think what I'm trying to say is just that I think it gets us into this idea, and I think that was actually really powerful for her to take a stance against that, in that it's not about actually moving towards whiteness or dominant culture, but really about providing resources. Do we have the resources actually to share with folks, because they're already brilliant. They already know what path that they want to go to. And so if we can share that, then we need to let folks determine what that path is going to be.
Cool. Appreciate that, Dennis. And actually, it made perfect sense. I didn't sound like rambling to me, so I appreciate that input. Let's go to a woman. Teo, you want to give your insights?
Sure, yeah. I think this is probably going to be a theme, but I really enjoyed the first scene of the short story. And I was also reminded of what Mary was describing with Zora Neale Hurston and kind of how her opinions can be seen as polarizing or sort of taken out of context, kind of used to create a lens to support, just racist ideologies and perpetuate racist ideologies when taken out of the context that Mary provided. And so I was kind of thinking about that as she was reading through the story. And I was also thinking about that and kind of how it tied into my education, and how in literature classes and in history classes, even if we read something and it was by a person of color, or it was authored by a person of color, unless the story was about that experience, there was kind of this lens of color blindness. And like, if they were talking about their scientific research or something like that, it would just never be vocalized that, there is sort of an element of race here. I guess I feel like I'm rambling as well, but I just want to say that specifically, I'm thinking of a short story that I read that was by a Black woman about her experience with feminism and having an abortion. And I didn't know that it was authored by a Black woman at all until I did research about it afterwards. And so they were not showcased and not, celebrated for being Black in a way that I think that they should have been, in a way that, just allows for racist ideologies to lie dormant, I guess. And yeah, I think those are my thoughts.
Thank you. Thanks for that. Lieutenant, I'm just going boy, girl. So you're the last guy left. Anything you want to add to any of the questions? Actually, it doesn't necessarily have to be about the story, but it could be about whether or not you knew of all of these examples, or it could be in terms of how would you define yourself now in light of this workshop?
Yeah, okay, I could definitely start about like my educational experience. I think I actually remember this very clearly too, because the first time I was introduced to a Black woman that was very influential, who wasn't like Harriet Tubman, was I think Ida B. Wells, and that was learning about her in the 1900s and her work in journalism. And it was when I was reading that little paragraph in my history book, it was kind of it was honestly really interesting to see, because I just reading that name, this sounds like a woman, and it says that they're saying that she's a Black woman, but it's I can't really put the pieces together, because this is still rare, so unheard of to find a Black woman who is not one of these tropes in a history book. So that was one of my first interactions with one of the lesser known Black women of American history. But going into how Black women are described and showcased in popular culture, which I think is also kind of related. It's we have these historical tropes or archetypes of Black women, and when we engage with Black women in our media, we often find it hard to engage seriously, or there is like a sort of disconnect when we try to engage with some sort of media that isn't like, that doesn't necessarily fit into any of the archetypes that we had like laid out for Black women. So it's kind of like, it's like interesting, like you sort of want people like Black women to showcase their experience and bring their own experiences to the forefront in their work, but you also don't want them to pigeonhole themselves and also like maybe like force them to only write about one thing and have their experience only be palatable to pop culture and mainstream media because it's something that people have seen before and they could like put it into a little box and understand it that way. So it's really like a hard little like tightrope sort of action, like definitely showcasing like the Black experience, Black woman experience, but you also don't want to typecast them. Yeah, and this happens across like, it's not just to Black women, but yeah, it's definitely something that happens to honestly all like people of color or marginalized experiences trying to break into the mainstream, I think. Yeah.
No, I hear you, and it's funny because while you were saying that, so it's almost as if you've got, I think women in general can easily be, if not marginalized, pigeonholed. You know, I'm just reminded on how my wife and I, we've been watching movies from the 30s and 40s to today, and in older generation movies, women had many different characters. They could be the main character. They were strong. They had multiple parts to them. They weren't just, pretty things. They were smart. They could be detectives. They could be conniving. They could be any number of things. And then there came a shift in movie production where it was just the woman was either the dumb blonde or the person tripping over themselves, etc. And I think we're going to get, we just got jumped out of.
Yeah, you're the main room. So everyone just comes back to your room.
Oh, okay. All right. We were just talking about the archetypes of women in media and how women get pigeonholed, not just, women in general, but then that gets, I think that double dips when it comes to women of color, where, you're very monolithic. You can't be this full spectrum. But we had a really nice conversation. I think everybody appreciated not only the history. I definitely didn't know everyone that you brought up, Mary, and so it was very educational and worth a listen.
Thank you. Do we have everyone back? I think we might be waiting for a couple.
We got about 6 more people.
Okay.
I did.
For request, I added it to the document, but I also dropped it in the chat, the full short story, so you can see where Nancy's journey goes, especially when she tag teams with her best friend Poisani, and they do some cool things, some pretty cool revolutionary things. I also, at the bottom, it has the annotated research bibliography, so you can see all of the references, all the language. So, one question I got was like, what's a Loa? That's like a Creole term for like spirit. And so that's like, which can be dark or light depending on, or neutral, depending on where they go. So you tend to meet some interesting spirits on that journey. And Betsy has some cool battles with her machetes. But yeah, so I dropped that in the chat. And also thank you, Teo, for dropping my track for Dragon Soul, which was the song I referenced. Yeah, so that's on all the platforms for people if they want to listen to it. Yeah. And so I think we have everybody. Do you have everybody back yet?
No, but they'll trickle in. You can.
Okay. I was gonna take like the next 2 or 3 minutes just if people had any reflections. I know Dad, I'm not gonna call you twos, I don't know. Dad for sharing some things. But if anyone else wanted to share any revelations or reactions they had in their small groups. You can also drop them in the chat if you do. Oh, is that Dennis?
Yeah, I just wanted to say just thank you for putting this together. I learned a lot, and just nice to be in a space that's actually not across the country, but like here in San Jose. And I'd love to learn more about just Black womanism and what that means for us here in the South Bay.
Thank you, Dennis.
I just want to say the same thing as like ditto what Dennis said. I met Mary in May-ish, and she's a phenomenal young woman, just somewhat of a genius to me. She does everything. But today, you know, just bringing this workshop here to us all, in a way, it was very liberating, even for me as a father of a young Black woman, you know, a young Black child. I think I heard of a lot of these women while I was in college, doing like Black studies, women's studies, stuff like that. But it seems like just like Assata Shakur and Angela Davis, at some point in time in their lives, they get drugged through the mud. Well, most of their lives they get drugged through the mud. But it seems like that's the narrative that becomes the status quo for powerful women, especially women of color like them. And so, for me, it was just like, how do we change that narrative as a community to uplift these women, and also educate, you know, the future generations about these women outside of college. I think many of us should have learned about most of these women while we were probably in elementary school, some point in time at like 4, 5, 6, sixth grade, somewhere in there, up until we, you know, stop our education. And so I just want to commend you for bringing this forward as our community starts to put forth, the San Jose community puts forth, you know, having certain studies, Chicano studies, you know, in schools. I think we need to do the same for the very small African-American population. And so now I got my head turning about who am I going to reach out to start making some noise around this.
Thank you, Dante, both for the kind words and also the reflection. Dante's awesome. He's also a co-founder of the Political Education Collective and has done so much work to help put on this event for all of you here today. So, you know, just lots of claps in your direction. And then I think I'm trying to see if we have everybody for me to do closings for. Owner is Gray on the political education account. I'm not sure if that's Gray or
it's Lauren.
That's Lauren. Okay. Hello, Lauren.
I can bring are you trying to close out this workout, or you want to bring the masculinity group back in too?
We could bring, just to close out this one first, and then we can bring okay. We can just do some closings. But yeah, thank you guys so much for taking time out of your Sunday to come hang out with the Political Education Collective. We were really, really excited to put on this series. It's definitely been a lot of work over the past few months just to get everybody together, plan all the things, work everything out. And so we're really, really happy with how things turned out and that you guys all came here together today. And yeah, so we're just gonna chill out and wait for folks to come back, and then I'll just say some more thank yous and be like, thank you. And so yeah, if anyone has any other comments or thoughts or reactions, you are welcome to share at this time. Otherwise, we can just chill like this.
I could definitely share and shout out that I got to talk with Tay, Mary, and Desire. And I appreciated that we got to talk about our educational experiences in different places and different times, and who we saw uplifted, who we got to experience. And also not only like who's in the curriculum, but who's teaching, the difference of having teachers who look like you and value you as really important. So yeah, it was exciting to be in a group with y'all.
I think everybody's come back. If anyone in that last breakout room, if you guys had any reactions you felt like sharing before we close out, This is an open call to you, no pressure.
I'll do a shout out, Mary. In our group, it was really interesting because one of the things about the whole movement that I'm not focused on are the white people. And so really fascinated to hear comments from a very empathetic, intelligent woman, white woman, about how she sees her role in the fight. And that was really super inspiring to me, because I think it is required in order for there to be social justice in the external system, that white people become anti-racist. And it was really exciting to see folks like that here.
Thank you for sharing. Mom, I'm also not gonna like I'm like mom, dad. I don't know. Yeah, thank you for sharing. And any last, well, like last 30 seconds, any additional comments, closings?
Well, when we get post-COVID, it'd be great to, there are quite a few people here from San Jose. I'd love to run into them, you know, maybe at that coffee shop that just opened up down the way there that you were talking about, Mary. What's it called again?
Nirvana Soul.
Nirvana Soul, yeah. Yeah, but it's awesome to see the spirit, well, in Oregon too, and in New York, but good to see a bunch of San Joseans. So let's meet you guys in person one of these days.
Yeah, thanks for dropping the link. Nirvana Soul is awesome. It's a new coffee shop founded by two awesome Black women in San Jose off of First Street. They just opened. It was originally Cafe Fresca, which was nice. I've performed open mics there. It was a nice space, but I just gotta say the renovation that these two sisters did for it looks so good. I'm so excited about it. So if you're in San Jose, definitely go check them out. They have great coffee and great ambiance and just great vibes. So that's my not at all support there. Danny, can you mute your I think Danny's on a train. But yes, so thank you guys so much for coming and attending this workshop and spending your time. And yeah, thank you so much. I'm open to having the other group come back in, and then we can do any closing. So yeah, thank you guys so much for taking this time. And I'm Mary, and that was the Black Feminist and Womanist Thought Workshop.
The last thing I'll say is we really want to support our facilitators. Mary is awesome. She hasn't asked for a dime. If you can give, share, anything helps. Thus far, we've raised about $500 just on the Venmo account. But we really do want to honor our facilitators, especially them being mostly people of color. And, you know, we just want to show our gratitude to them. So if you can donate any little bit, it helps. And most importantly, just share it on your platforms, just to raise awareness about who we are as a collective and, you know, our intention and the actions that we're putting forth in our community, you know, shape our community. So again, let's support Mary if we can. Thank you all.
And then Gray, are we closing? Gray and Dante, are we closing out?
So I've got some of the San Jose Fan Fest stuff on deck, but if you guys have anything you want to say before we go into that, or Mary, if you want to just take a second and tell people what that is.
Yeah, we'll just be playing some performances from the San Jose Fan Fest, which was a live stream music festival that our music and arts committee at San Jose Strong hosted back in July, and we were showcasing some awesome Black musicians in South Bay and San Jose. So that was an awesome festival. We also had an online art auction showcasing Black artists in San Jose, and we raised money for Dante's awesome organization, Raising the Bar. which supports foster care youth in the South Bay. And so, yeah, you guys can just jam out to the tunes and enjoy the vibes and the music. Thank you for coming.